The night was quiet inside the Grand Hotel lobby, but the silence was broken by muffled sobs coming from the service hallway. The undercover CEO, Richard Hayes, paused mid-step. He had disguised himself as a regular staff member, wearing the same uniform as the housekeeping team. No one knew his real identity. He was there to learn the truth about how his employees were treated, away from the polished smiles managers often put on in front of him. Richard had always believed a company was only as strong as its people, but tonight, he would learn what that truly meant. Following the faint sound of crying, he turned the corner and saw a young maid sitting on a plastic chair, her face buried in her hands. Her cleaning cart was parked beside her, untouched. She was whispering words that Richard could barely make out, but then he heard them clearly. "Please, God, I don't know how to pay the bill, don't take my son away." Richard's heart tightened. He walked closer and softly asked, "Are you all right?" The maid quickly stood up, wiping her tears and forcing a weak smile. "I'm fine, sir, just tired." Her trembling hands betrayed her words. Richard didn't push at first, but something inside him urged him to know more. "You can trust me. Sometimes talking helps," he said gently. Her name was Maria. A single mother who had been working at the hotel for 3 years. That night, she had just received a call from the hospital. Her 7-year-old son, Daniel, who had been sick with pneumonia, wouldn't be discharged until the bill was paid. The amount was far beyond what she earned in months of cleaning rooms and changing sheets. She had already borrowed money from relatives and neighbors, but no one had enough to help. As Maria spoke, her tears flowed uncontrollably. Richard listened silently, his heart breaking with every word. He had spent years building an empire, sitting in boardrooms discussing profits, expansions, and investments, but here was one of his employees, one of the invisible hands that kept his hotel spotless, struggling to keep her child alive because of money. For the first time, Richard felt ashamed. The next morning, Richard made a decision. Still undercover, he asked the hotel manager about employee benefits and salaries. What he discovered disturbed him. Staff worked long hours for minimum wage, with little support in emergencies. They were treated as replaceable, not as people with families and dreams. Richard realized he had been blind, trusting reports and numbers while lives like Maria's were quietly suffering. But he wasn't going to reveal himself just yet. Instead, he decided to test the culture of his own company. That week, he worked alongside the staff, cleaning rooms, scrubbing floors, folding sheets. He felt the weight of their struggles. Aching backs, endless shifts, and managers who rarely thanked them. He saw Maria working double shifts despite her exhaustion, whispering prayers under her breath for her son. One evening, Richard noticed Maria skipping her own dinner to save money. She quietly packed the leftover bread and fruit from the staff cafeteria into her bag, food she would later take to the hospital for her boy. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He thought of his own childhood, how his mother had worked as a waitress to keep food on the table. He remembered her tired smile, and it hit him. His success had been built on the sacrifices of people just like Maria. Finally, Richard knew what he had to do. On the last day of his undercover visit, the hotel staff were called into the lobby for a special announcement. Maria stood at the back, confused, still holding her cleaning gloves. Then Richard walked in, not in his maid uniform, but in a sharp suit. Gasps filled the room as whispers spread. "That's the CEO?" Maria's eyes widened in disbelief. The same man who had listened to her tears in the hallway was not just another worker, he was the owner of the entire hotel chain. Richard stepped forward and spoke, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I came here to see how this hotel really runs. I wanted to understand the lives of the people who make it what it is. And what I saw broke my heart. You are the backbone of this company, yet too many of you are struggling in silence. Last week, I met a woman here, one of our own, who is fighting for her son's life because she cannot afford his hospital bill. That is unacceptable." Maria covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming again. Richard continued, his voice cracking slightly, no parent should have to choose between feeding their family and saving their child. Today, I am making sure her son's hospital bills are paid in full. And starting immediately, every employee will have access to emergency medical support and fair wages. Because you are not just workers. You are family. The room erupted into applause, but Maria couldn't move. She stood frozen as Richard walked toward her and placed an envelope in her hands. Inside was proof that her son's bill had been cleared. "Go be with your boy," Richard said softly. "He needs his mother more than we need you here tonight." Maria fell to her knees, sobbing with gratitude. She whispered, thank you for seeing us." Weeks later, Daniel fully recovered. Maria returned to work with a new sense of hope, no longer invisible, no longer just a maid. She was a respected part of something bigger. The company transformed under Richard's leadership, not just in profits, but in purpose. Employees worked with pride, knowing their well-being mattered. Customers noticed the difference too, not just in the clean rooms but in the warmth of the service, because when people are cared for, they pass it on. Richard often visited Maria and her son, never as the CEO, but as a friend. And every time Daniel smiled, Richard was reminded of the lesson he had learned. True success isn't measured by money in the bank, but by the lives we touch and the hearts we heal. In the end, one undercover night changed everything, for Maria, for Richard, and for an entire company. It was proof that kindness and compassion could rewrite destinies. And as Richard once said in a speech that later went viral, the greatest return on investment is not found in numbers, it's found in people.